When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Making everyone happy on vacation isn't easy, but you know what is? Going to Aruba. All you have to do is walk out your door to find pristine pools, relaxing white sand beaches, and an island teeming with outdoor activities that'll put a smile on any face. You won't just feel great, you'll all feel great, filled with a calmer, more peaceful vibe that radiates Aruba's warmth. And the best part is, it never fades. That's the Aruba effect. Plan your family trip at Aruba.com.
Hey friends, I'm Rachael Groll, and I'm your host for the Hearing Jesus podcast, where I help you to know God and to make Him known. Well, hey everyone, welcome back to the Hearing Jesus podcast. I'm your host, Rachael Groll, and today I have a special friend with me, Lysa Terkeurst, which is somebody that probably doesn't need an introduction. She's a New York Times bestselling author. She leads Proverbs 31, and I'm sure many of you have heard her even in person. And so I'm really excited to have a conversation with Lysa today. Lysa, thanks so much for joining us.
You're so welcome. Thank you. It's always a joy to connect with new audiences. And so whether I'm new or not, to those of you listening, I am so happy to be here with you.
Yeah. So Lysa, today I think we're just going to jump right in because there's so many things I want to talk to you about. I got a copy of your newest book, and there's so many issues that I think are relevant to my audience and I think to women in general. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking today about the topic of trust. And I think for a lot of women, we often find ourselves lumped into this category of having quote unquote trust issues, which is a phrase I know that you kind of take issue with. And so I wondered if you would kind of address that and unpack that for us a little bit.
Well, we live in a day and time, according to research, that the average American lies or is deceitful 4 times a day. So if you think about that, it's no wonder that many of us feel skeptical, possibly even a little cynical at times. And it can be really challenging to discern what to believe, what not to believe, who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth. And so, of course, combine that with other relationship traumas that we have. And of course, we have trust issues. The issue I have with that phraseology is that a lot of times people will either use it as an excuse for some kind of relationship struggle that they have, like, well, I just have trust issues, right? But when we brush it off that way, we kind of accept it as if it's a permanent diagnosis in our life rather than something that is very doable to work on. The other flip side of that is maybe sometimes people have said it to you and weaponized that phrase against you as if it's like a bad smell that's stuck on you and you can't get off of it. You can't get it off of you. So I like to say, let's just all admit that at times we do have issues with trust. So therefore we have trust issues, and let's accept it, but not as something like a permanent condition, but rather something that we're willing to work on, because trust is the oxygen of all human relationships. If we starve our relationships of trust, then we will starve our relationships of vibrancy and possibly even life. So it's absolutely crucial that we tend well to this issue.
Why did you get to a place where you wanted to write a book about this? Because it's a hard subject to talk about.
It is a hard subject, but it's even harder to live through it and not know what to do about it. Mm-hmm. And so when I start writing a book, I don't actually start by writing. I start by listening. And gather groups of women, both friends of mine, but also people that that follow me on social media, and I'll just put out an invitation for us to get together and have a conversation. And that's where a book starts. It's by me listening. And as I brought up the topic of trust issues, betrayal trauma, friendship breakups, divorce, and maybe even just the everyday aggravations when we think we can count on someone and then they prove otherwise, it was fascinating to me to hear how pervasive the issue of broken trust is, but also how ill-equipped many of us feel. And I was right in that group. Like, I felt so ill-equipped. Trust is something so amazingly beautiful. And then when it gets broken, it can be so devastating and seemingly impossible. Like, how do I even fix this? Where do I start? What do I do? And so I felt like this was a topic that needed to be explored from a Christian perspective, but also from a theological perspective and a therapeutic perspective.
Yeah. Speaking of therapeutic, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, which I think is fascinating, is the work that you did with Dr. Amen. And the reason why I asked that is, like, years ago, probably 20 years ago, before social media was as big as it is and before people knew who he was, I had gone through therapy, and it was in therapy that the therapist talked about Dr. Amen, and we listened to like an old VHS tape or something. And I found his work completely fascinating. It was the first time I realized that trauma had an impact on our body. And so can you just share a little bit about what your experience working with him was like?
Absolutely. So trauma is not just the fact of what happens to us. It's also the story that we tell ourselves about what happened to us. And also, we have to be really careful about not living our life, reducing our life down to the limitations of living hurt. And so I think when we have our trust broken, broken trust complicates every bit of the part of love that should be most comforting to us. And when trust is broken, the only way to repair it is to acknowledge that every rip in trust needs an intentional repair. It's just not going to get better on its own. And then how do we repair it? Well, repairing trust takes time plus believable behavior. And so I recognized that I had lingering issues because of some of the betrayal trauma that I'd walked through. I just didn't know what to do about it. And I wasn't sure if these lingering issues were just evidence of like some kind of mental issue that I was having, or if I could really attribute it to the trauma that I had experienced. And I wanted to know why. Why was I experiencing PTSD? Why was I experiencing catastrophic thinking? Why did it feel like my thoughts were getting caught on a loop and I would obsess about something and couldn't get out of that thought spiral? Why was it that I suddenly started misreading cues from people and having a general skepticism about them that I never had before? And so when I went to go see Dr. Amen, he did a battery of tests. It was 2 days. It was a very lengthy process, but it was fascinating because not only did he do the cognitive test, but he also did scans of my brain. After all the test results came in and the scans came in, he put a TV, we stood in front of a TV, and he put up a picture of a healthy brain. And then he put up a picture of what my brain looked like. And there were 4 anxiety centers that were completely lit up. That means that like they were active with anxiety. And he said that is the trauma diamond when you have those 4 centers, and they were actively lit up whether I was at rest or whether I was active. So it was kind of this undercurrent of anxiety that was bubbling inside of me. And he showed me how different anxiety centers cause different things. He pointed to the top one and he said, that's PTSD, when you go through an experience and you then have post-traumatic stress disorder, That's where you see that anxiety lit up in that center. And the good news, though, is that he said that he could tell that I'd been doing some good therapeutic work called EMDR, which is a wonderful way to reconnect the two hemispheres of the brain back together. And specialists that are trained to do this can really help make a lot of progress. And he could tell that I had been actively working, and that center was less lit up than what he would have expected. And so that was very encouraging. The other three centers were pretty actively still lit up. And so it was, at first I was like, wow, this is kind of discouraging, because there's been a great impact from the betrayals that, happened to me. Because broken trust often, it's not just what happens to us, it's what happens in us. And so I stood in front of that TV screen, and I thought to myself, I am never again going to hesitate to use the words emotional abuse, because I can see the physical ramifications of the betrayals that I've walked through. And the good news is that at least now I know what I'm dealing with. I know there's a reason that I struggle with catastrophic thinking and thoughts spiraling, and all of that. There's a reason for that. And the first step to healing is awareness. And so it was really helpful. And now look, not everyone can go get their brain scanned and go through all these tests, but I don't think you have to. I think if you walk through some friendship breakups that were really hurtful to you, or the betrayal of a family member, or the devastation of a spouse cheating on you, or possibly even a divorce, I think you can pretty much say, if you're having some of the evidence like PTSD, thought spiraling, other things that I've described, you don't have to have your brain scanned to know that that's probably what's going on.
I love that perspective, because I think one of the things that I've really tried to explain to the audience is how helpful therapy can be. I also went through EMDR after a spousal betrayal and divorce. I was similar in the sense, like, I resonated with some of the things that you said in your book. Like, I started to try to replace healing or even therapy with control or working a lot. Like, the trauma drive is real. I got a lot done during that season of my life. But then also, one of the things that you said that I think is going to resonate with a lot of women is just the temptation to quietly quit on your own life. Like, I know that's a newer term, quiet quitting, but that's the reality. And it really articulated what I went through before I got to this place of healing. And now I'm like such a proponent of EMDR because it has like saved my life. But could you maybe speak to the woman that is tempted to quietly quit? And how did that look when you were in that season of life?
Yeah. So the chapter that I wrote on this is called Quietly Quitting on Hope. And here's how you can know that that's starting to happen. I'll give you an example from my life. After my divorce, I needed a very long season to be by myself. And I'm thankful that I took that season. It was years that I needed to make sure that I wasn't looking for another person to help me get through the intensity of loneliness and help me heal, because that would have created a need in me for that person that could potentially have been a trauma bond. But even more than that, when you desperately need someone, maybe you would settle for anyone that's comforting, but not necessarily what's very best. And I needed to take that season of healing too, because I wanted to become the healthiest version of myself. Otherwise, I was going to attract what felt normal, and normal coming out of a divorce. Dysfunction felt normal to me. And I didn't want to jump right back into another dysfunctional relationship because that quote unquote felt normal, even if it wasn't good. So I had this long season of being by myself and learning to be alone with my own thoughts, which my counselor said that's a sign of a mentally stable person, is that they can be alone with their own thoughts and be okay with it. So I went through this long season. Now, here's where the quietly quitting on hope came in, is that I would say with my mouth, I think I'm good. I think I'm good just being by myself. I don't ever want to date again. But in my heart, that's not at all what I was feeling. In my heart, I wanted to eventually meet someone. I wanted another chance at love. I wanted to have a husband. I wanted to have a partner in that. But that's not at all what was happening inside my heart. Inside my heart, I wanted another shot at love. I didn't want to be alone. I wanted to explore the possibility of, getting married again. So there was an incongruent thing happening here. It's like I was saying externally, no, never, but internally, I was feeling the exact opposite. And when we do that, that means that we're making statements to manage what feels scary. And it felt scary to me to risk hoping for something that may or may not ever happen. So instead of me verbalizing my hope, I quietly quit on that hope. And I was trying to manage externally something that I feared may or may not ever happen.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Oh, such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop Blinds.com's primetime kickoff event. Save up to 50% off select styles, plus doorbusters. Rules and restrictions may apply.
I think a lot of women find themselves in that place because I think it's hard to, at least with where I'm at and the churches that I've been involved in, there's sometimes a stigma around going to therapy and admitting that, okay, I don't know how to deal with this, and prayer just doesn't seem to be working. Like, I am praying about this, but nothing's changed. And one of the things that I think went through my mind a lot when I was going through it is something that I think you kind of, hit on too a little bit in the book, is how can you find your place of trusting God when the person who betrayed you got away with it and they seem to get away with everything? I mean, I remember when I went through my divorce, it was like every day I would hear about something else that it was just constantly he was getting away with. And it was like, I'm the one that has like this scarlet letter on me because I'm now divorced in the church, but I wasn't the one that did anything wrong. And yet, sometimes the people that betray us feel like they get off scot-free. And it really put this barrier in my relationship with the Lord. And I wondered how you dealt with that when you were going through it.
Yeah, this is such an important topic. I wrote an entire chapter on this. Like, how do I trust God when the person who hurt me just seems to get away with it, Yeah. So here's what we have to remember is it may appear that the person who hurt us has moved on in their life and they are just living their best life ever. It may appear that way because sin always has an aspect of pleasure or satisfaction to it. But sin also always comes as a package deal. So with sin, the pleasure of that sin is also packaged with the consequences of that sin. Every sin that's committed has consequences naturally built into it. I think that's one of the reasons God says don't do it. Because if we do, we will unleash these consequences on us that chances are will be a very bad trade. And I think also that's why God says pray for your enemies, because if someone sins against you, they have just unleashed consequences that they may think will never happen, but they will. God will not be mocked. God will address this. Now, he's the only one that can address it in equal measures of mercy and justice. But here's where we have to be really, really careful. We cannot look at the seemingly absence, like it seems like that justice is absent. We can't look at that absence and equate it to a lack of God's presence. God is there. He will address this in his timing and in his way. So that should comfort us. Like, it's not like the person who hurt us is just forever and ever and ever going to get away with this. There will be consequences, and that those consequences will come about.
So one of the things that I feel like I've heard a lot, at least in the last year or two, is, it's one thing when you're talking about the betrayal of trust with a spouse or a friendship breakup or something like that. There's a whole other side of things that I think people are having a hard time reconciling. And that's when it's some sort of organization, whether it was their church or a company, like where they worked, or even a ministry. Sometimes, and the reality is this side of heaven, no human being is perfect. So because people are involved, this happens. But sometimes there's a betrayal that really hurts, and it's coming from a place that you either trusted or that you should have been able to trust. And so I wondered if you had any insight for people that are really struggling, because I think that is, in the age of what we're seeing in the news cycle pretty often, large platform mega church pastors are falling from grace because of sin. Even in situations like that, where it's somebody where you just listened to their podcast and read their books, there's still this level of betrayal that we feel because it was somebody that should have been able to be trusted. And so I wonder what your perspective was when it's something like that.
Yeah, it's so hurtful, because when the organization that is supposed to help people winds up hurting people, it's almost like a double hurt, because we really, usually it's where we really experienced a lot of benefit from that person's teaching or that person's preaching. And so there was even a deeper level of trust there, because that deeper level of trust is like, I can really count on you to be who you say you're going to be. And when that's stripped away from us, it can be so disillusioning. And that was the situation for me. There was a Christian organization that I had really looked to their teaching for years. I had gotten to be friends with some of the leaders. I fully trusted them. And then when I went through my divorce, they decided to come up with a campaign slogan to get people to come to a marriage conference that they were doing. And it basically said, "Don't let what happened to Lysa Terkeurst's marriage happen to you." So there was just this deep shock in me. Like, I just couldn't believe it. Like, how could good people, and I do believe these were good people, how could good people make such a poor decision that was so extremely hurtful? How could they disregard what was so painful to me and use it to profit themselves? It was really, really hard. So for those of you that have walked through this, I just want to pause right now, and I just want to say, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that whatever it was that they did, they shouldn't have done that. And whatever it was said to you, it shouldn't have been said, and it was wrong. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that. At the same time, I also want to say, you deserve to stop suffering because of what other people have done. And we don't want to allow the hurtful action that they took to continue to hurt us by giving up something like going to church, worshiping with other believers, or even believing in God. We don't want to give up something that's so fundamentally important to our own spiritual health just because those people made some poor decisions. Now, I get it. Maybe you need to take a break for a while. Maybe you need to, seek some wise counsel, spend some time just processing what happened. I believe God will give you grace for all of that. But I would just encourage you not to swing it to such an extreme that you start to get this feeling that all Christians are bad, that God can't be trusted, and that the church is all just some big bad joke, because that may be true, that there were some really hurtful things that happened in some organizations, but it's not all organizations. And we want to make sure that in an effort to defend truth, that we don't violate truth. And sometimes when we want to read our Bible the least is actually when we need it the most. Sometimes when we want to isolate and stop going to church the most, that's when we really need to step into church and do the very thing. I tell a story in the book where, after all the disillusionment and all the hurt, I just had to decide, I cannot let their actions turn me into someone I was never meant to be. I was built to love Christ. I was built to worship God in the body of believers. I was made to read God's word and let it impact me. That's what I was made to do. And I'm called to teach it. So therefore, I have to realize how important it is to feed my soul in those ways. And so at the end of this chapter, I talk about going to church and standing up and worshiping God. And I didn't want the worship to end. Usually I'm the girl that's like, okay, 3 songs. Now let's get to the teaching, But on that day, I don't know. It's like the worship washed over me. And I knew this is what my soul was hand designed by God to receive, as not only worshiping him, but such rich comfort to my own soul. And I was so glad I didn't stay at home that day. And so however this plays out for you, I just want to say, no human is more powerful than God. And broken trust, it can be life altering, but it shouldn't be life ruining.
Yeah, that's powerful. I know when I was going through it, so in addition to some relational trauma with my ex-husband and things like that, there was some organizational betrayal. And I know for me, I just felt like done with church. Like, I'm done with church. We're going to have church at our house. We're just done with people. And while of course I'm no longer there was a season where, like you said, I did have to kind of just withdraw. And I found myself in this place of really seeking the Lord in a way that was not the God of religion. It was not the God of the church. It was not the God of the people that hurt me. It was really the God of the Bible. And just really being vulnerable with the Lord and saying, okay, I need you to show me who you are in this, because I don't even feel like I can talk to anybody about this. Because when you're in a position of leadership, even when somebody else is wrong and there's been a betrayal, there's still damage that can be done if you start running your mouth. And so I was in a very lonely place where I felt like there was very few people that could even understand what I was going through. And it was really in that season where there was a new aspect of my relationship with the Lord that was really unpacked that probably couldn't have been otherwise. And so the level of healing that even came from honing in on just allowing the Holy Spirit to heal some of those broken places is not something that I would even give up now. And not that that was fun or that I would want to go through that again, but yet the aspect of who God is in my life, I wouldn't trade that for anything, knowing him on that level. So I think that reminds me of one of the things you talk about, and it is this idea of rebellious acts of resilience. And what does that look like? So for somebody that is in this place where they've walked through some sort of relational trauma, what does a rebellious act of resilience look like in your world?
Well, it means listening to evidence that we have reduced our life down to the limitations of living hurt. And what I mean by that is suddenly saying things like, I can't do this, or I don't do this. When in reality, sometimes we can't and sometimes we don't. Okay. But sometimes we're saying can't and don't over things that we absolutely could do and possibly even should do, And so let me just give you an example of that. I'd gone to the beach with a couple of friends. And when I go to the beach, my definition of enjoying the beach is to get a little cooler, put some ice in it, fix a little sandwich, some chips, some fruit, get my water bottle, put it all in my little cooler. And I like ice to be in the cooler so that everything stays cold. So when I'm down at the beach and I'm hot, I can open up my cooler and it's like an oasis right there that I've carried with me, right? And I like to sit in a chair. I like to read my book and enjoy my little treats. Well, I got my little cooler and I was getting ready to go down to the beach, and I pushed the ice maker lever and nothing happened. And I realized the ice maker is broken. And in that moment, have you ever been in a situation where it's not just about the thing, it's like the thing beneath the thing,
What it represents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I stood in the kitchen and I just had such a tantrum. I just said if he would have never cheated on me, then we wouldn't be divorced. And if we weren't divorced, he would be here. And if he was here, he would know how to fix the ice maker. And if he was here and he knew how to fix the ice maker, then I would have ice. And, now another thing that's been taken from me. And I think that's something to really pay attention to, because yes, when we go through seasons of betrayal and hurt and loss and all of those things, there's a lot that is taken from us, but there's also a lot that we can gain in that season. And sometimes, we all sometimes are called upon to be brave, but what I started learning is you've got to do brave before you become brave. And so when I stood there and I said, I can't fix this ice maker, I stopped myself and I said, but what if I could? What's the worst that can happen? Like, it gets broken, it's already broken. And so I YouTubed instructions and a little video. And as God is my witness, I fixed that ice maker. And when the ice finally was made and dropped down from that ice maker, it was such an epic moment of victory, and it had nothing to do with the ice.
Right.
It's that I proved to myself I could do brave, and therefore I could be brave, right? And it just meant so much to me. It was forward progress. It was something I gained. Yes, I lost a lot, but look what I've gained. I would have never known I could have fixed the ice maker. I would, and it was so small, but yet so meaningful to me. And on that same trip, then, when my friends were talking about going down to the beach, of course, in my mind, I already told you, that means taking my chair, a good book, my little cooler, and my sandwich, my chips, and my fruit, and my ice water, and sitting on the beach. To one of my friends, going to the beach meant grabbing a boogie board and playing in the waves. And I said to her, oh no, I don't do oceans. Like, there are sharks that eat people, jellyfish that sting people. There are shells that could cut my foot. No, I don't do oceans. And she was like, huh, interesting. So when we walked down to the beach, I saw her carrying her boogie board, but she carried 2 other boogie boards with her. And I thought, oh, she thinks she can trick me. She cannot trick me. I'm going to sit on a chair and I'm going to read my book. So when we got down there, she didn't say anything. She quietly laid a boogie board down in front of me, a boogie board down in front of my friend who also likes to just sit on the beach. And then she grabbed her boogie board and went and jumped in the waves and started playing. And I rolled my eyes and said, oh, I don't do oceans. And I stopped myself and I said, but what if I did? And before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed that boogie board. I went and jumped in the ocean. It was disastrous. A wave took me under. My bathing suit bottoms came off, the whole 9 yards. But I stayed and I played in that ocean. And for the hour that I was in that ocean, I had no issues. I had nothing but laughter and joy and a return back to the purest form of who I am. And that is, I'm a happy, positive girl who's just been through some really rough patches in life.
Yeah.
And so rebellious acts of resilience are when we decide that maybe we don't feel very brave, but we can do brave until we become brave. Listen to the I can'ts and I don'ts in our life, because chances are if we don't pay attention to that, the I can'ts and I don'ts will turn into I won'ts. I won't heal. I won't get better. I won't move forward. I won't try new things. And we've got to rebel against that. So that's why I called them rebellious acts of resilience.
Oh, I love that so much. I love that so much. Well, I'm so thankful for this resource, because I know when I was going through some of these things in my life, I looked for resources and couldn't find them. So I'm so thankful that this will be out there for women to just get their hands on. I wondered if you would pray for the women as we close out today that might be finding themselves in this place, whether it is fresh or something that they're just holding on to because they haven't figured out how to heal from it. If you would pray for them and just usher them into a season of healing where they can, like you say in the book, just because they've been hurt doesn't mean they have to live hurt. I really think that that's my prayer for these women, is that they would experience freedom in this area. So I was hoping you would pray for them today.
Absolutely. Lord, I pray for any woman that's listening to this podcast right now who is carrying that deep pain of feeling rejected, feeling hurt because she thought she could count on someone and they proved otherwise, feeling disillusioned because somebody she thought loved her very, very much has lied to her, deceived her, walked away from her, talked down to her, whatever the situation may be. And she's walked through some serious trauma as a result of other people's actions. And Lord, I just pray that you would take your mercy and wrap it all the way around her heart. And Lord, I pray that you would open her eyes up to see that right now might be hard, but that this isn't a life sentence. This isn't the way things are always going to be. Her job today, Lord, is to be obedient to you. Your job is everything else. She doesn't need to carry the pressure of trying to figure out the future. She doesn't need to worry about where her provision is going to come from and like who's ever going to love her and all those things that we can really spiral in our thinking over. But Lord, her job today is just to be obedient to you, and that your job is everything else. And that's why it's called faith, because sometimes we have to walk forward and we don't see the next step. We don't see into tomorrow, but you do, and you're already there waiting on us. And Lord, you have shown me time and time again when I felt so hopeless that you were in the end so faithful. And so Lord, I pray that if she doesn't have enough faith to stand on her own belief in you today, Lord, that she would hear something in my voice that gives her just enough courage to keep pressing on. Because you don't want to go at this alone, friend. You just don't. So Lord, I pray that you would help them to see they're not alone, that you are there, that you will sustain them, provide for them, and that you will lead them in the very best way. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Lysa, thanks so much for coming on the show. Where can people find your book? When is it coming out?
It comes out October 8th, and it's going to be available wherever books are sold, wherever you like to get your books, whether it's Amazon or Target, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, another bookstore, or you can always go to my ministry website, proverbs31.org.
Perfect. Thanks so much for joining us today, Lysa.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rachel.
Do you like to shop? You know that I do. So I wanted to let you know about some extra resources I have over at my online store at shehears.org. They're designed to help you grow in your faith. Whether you're looking for a new Bible or Bible tabs or even additional Bible studies, I've curated a selection of some of my favorite things that I think you are really going to love. For our podcast listeners, I'm offering a 10% discount when you enter the code PODCAST. Again, head to shehears.org and use the code PODCAST for 10% off.
Greetings and God bless. This is Tyler Burns.
And this is Dr. Jamar Tisby.
And we want to invite you to check out our podcast, Pass the Mic, Dynamic Voices for a Diverse Church.
Pass the Mic has been speaking directly to the core concerns of Black Christians for over a decade.
On our show, we've got interviews from theologians, historians, actors, activists, and so much more.
Not to mention heartfelt, open dialogue on some of the heaviest issues facing the church in the United States.
Be sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you there on the next Pass the Mic.
My name's Preston Sprinkle, and I host the Theology in the Raw podcast. Theology in the Raw aims to help believers to think Christianly about theological and cultural issues by engaging in curious conversations with a diverse range of thoughtful people. I have conversations with a wide range of different guests who come from different perspectives, and no topic is off limits. Sexuality, abortion, politics, LGBTQ, warfare, violence, marijuana, immigration, you name it. If you have a theological or cultural issue that you have been wrestling with over 1,100 episodes, we've probably talked about it on Theology in the Raw. Along with conversations with various people, I also address questions sent in from my audience every month. And occasionally, I will talk about some of my latest research projects that I'm currently working on. Theology in the Raw is not for everyone. It is uncut, uncensored, and I don't give trigger warnings. So check out Theology in the Raw through your favorite podcast app.